The following podcast is part of the MindBodySpirit.fm podcast network.
Wholeness means to me being in a state of joy.
Wholeness means feeling complete, owning my authentic gifts.
Wholeness is really connected. Everything is connected to everything.
Wholeness is where we have access to all parts of ourselves.
This conversation with Darlene Green will have you walking away a transformed person. And that is her goal. She claims that she is a steward entrusted with a divine message. Her 3 books, In Service of Love, are her year in writing with what she calls her Council of Light. They are sacred texts that raise you in frequency as you read. This episode is a 2-parter, and every nugget of it is pure gold.
When you're talking about spiritual gifts, those are things that are so innate to each one of us that it's really easy to consider that these spiritual gifts are things that everybody has. So in asking, how did I get here? It's just been my whole life. Very early on in my life, I was 4 years old. I remember the moment, and I heard my counsel for the very first time, as if somebody else was right there in the room, as if it was the voice of a parent. And that was something that was so assuring, reassuring, comforting to me, that when at 4 years old, I asked internally, why am I here? Why am I here? And I heard the voice say, to make people happy. And at 4 years old, that clearly was sufficient. And I didn't need to ask where that voice came from because it felt so natural. I knew it wasn't my parents, but it was more than family. It was close to me. And I didn't know what a counsel was, but I knew that I had one. So my whole life has been one of being incredibly sensitive, highly sensitive. So if you can imagine, all children when they're born, as a process of learning, the antennae are up high in order to be able to learn about life, right? That's natural for all young children. But I think my antenna, as with many other highly intuitive and empathic children, was on high. I perceived things that I couldn't see. I perceived like the condition of the world. I felt the energy of what's happening in the world very early on in my life. And I remember in the 60s, I remember thinking, this is really not comfortable. I really wish the 60s would hurry up and go away.
Yeah.
But so I've been highly, highly sensitive and didn't have the words to be able to communicate what's happening, to even be able to ask about it, because it's not how I'm wired. The way that I'm wired is very kinesthetic. And kinesthetic, visual, color means a tremendous amount to me. And it always has. So growing up, even though I had qualities of being highly creative and being very kind and empathic and a good friend, I couldn't take it beyond that. I didn't know what that meant. I did know, though, and I did understand that when I was in elementary school, I realized that I had this deep inner drumbeat towards something, to a mission, to something. And I didn't understand it, but it was so clear in me that I asked my twin sister, I said, Debbie, do you feel like you're being mailed somewhere, but you don't know where?
Oh, wow.
That's how I felt. I said, I want to know where I'm going. But so there was this consistent, persistent drumbeat of a mission or a place I was supposed to be or something I was supposed to do. And I guess that was probably the beginning of a spiritual journey. My twin sister, by the way, said, nah.
Right.
No.
Right. No. Wow. That's a gift to have that contrast, actually. That's amazing.
It is, and I've
Yeah.
relied on her because I'm
Right.
so nonlinear. I've
Right.
relied on my twin sister because
Right.
she has a very linear capacity. So I
Right.
held on to her a lot.
Right.
So I was also a natural healer. So people would just come to me, even family members would come to me naturally if there was issues with babies or with
Wow.
animals growing up. And I just knew that I had the ability to be able to help. I was a natural helper, a natural teacher, and a natural healer. But I didn't know where this all what that means within the framework of life.
Mm-hmm.
So as I continued to grow in college, I realized that this drumbeat that I would say that I was completely unconscious, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
I was ensconced within the world that I saw because
Right.
there was no other mirroring that was around me. My family was Lutheran,
Mm-hmm.
and we went to church most often,
Mm-hmm.
but I didn't find answers there either. Actually, I do remember being 4 years old also in the Lutheran church one Sunday, and I remember saying to myself as I'm watching the pastor, that's not the whole story.
Mm.
I remember thinking that.
Yeah.
So anyway, in college, there was this thing that was this drumbeat in my life that is like I wanted to learn more about it, and it had to do with something sacred. But I didn't know how to get to it.
Mm-hmm.
So got married, and a couple years after Ed and I were married, and I'm in my late 20s then. I thought I'm gonna explore spirituality.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that was the beginning of it. That was the beginning of everything. Even though I had had so many so-called mystical experiences as I was
Right.
growing up, and I didn't have a framework for it. But when
Mm-hmm.
I said to myself that I intended to learn about spirituality, I took a meditation class and everything broke open. By being broken open, what I mean is that my capacity to see expanded extraordinarily so. So seeing Jesus in front of me.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I'm not going to describe this for you. I was invited to a meditation group. That was actually A Course in Miracles.
Mm-hmm.
And I had never been to that before, and I was new in that environment. And so we sit down, and the way we start that meeting was with a meditation. While I'm sitting with my eyes closed, immediately Jesus appears in front of me with his arms out like this. And not only am I seeing that, but I am feeling the whole presence of the divine in front of me. And in the extraordinary moment of that presence, I am sobbing. And I was confused. And I said to Jesus, I said, are you inside me or outside me? And all of this was telepathic. I mean,
Right.
because I would say words and then the answers back were like a whole concept. And what he
Right.
said was, he waved his arm. And as he waved his arm, he revealed the whole universe.
Oh, wow. Wow.
And he said, and infinity. And he said, all this is inside you. So that was my first experience. And again, that experience occurred. It was extraordinary and profound, but I didn't know what it meant.
Right.
And so I was off to the races. I became a devout student and reader of everything that I could find.
Mhm.
And I began studying some of the Essene works,
Mm.
and I felt a connection with that. And
Mhm.
it's interesting. I found that, and I thought, oh, this is it. This is it. This is it. I found it. And I heard that internal voice again
Mhm.
follows me my whole life,
Yes.
inserting when in appropriate moments. And the voice said, yes, and
And yes.
dot, dot, dot.
Right.
Oh, darn.
Right.
You mean I have to go back and look again? So I was reading and reading and reading. I did a lot of work, a lot of reading. I didn't even know where to start, except
Right.
that, people that were around me at the time and had friends that had books. I mean, I studied the Seth material.
Mm.
And do you know who that is?
No, I don't.
Jane Roberts was an early channel.
Mm.
And I never even knew what that was. I didn't know what that was. And the book was about um, the reality of the dimension that we live in,
Mm.
about multidimensionality. And I had no way of understanding that either. And so after I read the book, I thought, I really can't even understand anything that I just wrote. I mean, anything that I just read, but I agree with it.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
I mean, and where am I going to be talking about this also,
Right.
really, too, right? So I have this awareness and this inner growth that's happening. So
Right.
that's happening one line in my life. And the other line in my life is being a stepmom and a wife and working, right? So
Mhm.
I have these two lines in my life
Mhm.
that are working in parallel. Um, so I studied angels.
Mm.
I studied about crystals and stones. I became curious about nature because I've always calmed and deeply connected in nature.
Mhm.
Looking at the sky as being something that has like always connected me with the divine, or it took me to a place, even
Mhm.
though I didn't understand it. It was like I would do that like automatically.
Mhm.
And that's often when I would receive information or a sentence that was impactful, that would like guide the next steps of my life.
Mhm.
And um, and then I became really interested in healing, and I was introduced to energetic healing work. I studied Reiki, became a Reiki master. I learned about vibrational healing, and it had such a deep, deep, deep connection with me that I I I became a massage therapist.
Mm.
I went to school to become a massage therapist so that I could do that work. I felt such a calling to that, that was the perfect place to be able to utilize this high level of sensitivity, which, by the way, had been increasing and increasing and increasing,
Mhm.
so that people would walk by me, in my life, in the street, at the grocery store, at the mall,
Mhm.
and I knew what was going on in their life.
Mhm.
I could it's not that I intended to, but
Right.
I just did, but I didn't also understand how to be able to manage my own energy,
Right. Right.
right? So
Right.
this is all a process. So
Yes.
becoming a massage therapist, being a part of a helping, healing community, I
Mhm.
really had to learn to not take on the energies of the people that I was seeing. And that was kind of challenging, actually,
Mhm.
being so empathic
Yeah.
that somebody would walk into my treatment room and I knew immediately if it was a shoulder or a knee. It's like, oh, that right knee bothering you again?
Mhm.
Because I could see it. I
Yeah.
could see it.
Mm.
I mean, it was undeniable. It was
Yeah.
like, the color of sweater that they were wearing. It's like, I see you wearing a beautiful blue sweater and your right knee hurts.
Right. 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 Yeah. And I really appreciate that explanation because sometimes it's held me back because that your moment with Jesus, to some people that would be kind of result, an ending, or, just kind of like, well, and happily ever after. It's almost like that becomes like, oh, then your whole life must be better, and it's not that it wasn't this profound experience, but there is some, that it comes in such big packets. It takes a long time to be able to understand it, to be able to, and like you say, that parallel life still is part of your life, that it's, so what your guide said to you, which, by the way, ever since I heard you call them, use that word counsel, I've always loved that, because whenever I get really, in my ego, want to know names, very earthly type thing, it's like they'll throw me a dumb name. I looked up a name one time. It was like, I got to look in my journal and remember what it was. And one time it was like, that this is a name for a man. Like, it was like a man. And I was like, okay. And then another time it was like person number 1, person number 2. Like, that was what the meaning of these names were. And I just laughed. I'm like, okay. And they'll let me call them whatever I want. But I love the word counsel, because that's just so much easier to wrap your head around, by the way. I appreciate that. I learned that from you. I appreciate that.
Oh, isn't that great?
Yeah. But in those, but sometimes in sharing those experiences, like, people react as if, I've got to listen to you. I've got to follow everything you do because you've got it all figured out. And it's not quite that same. It's not that same.
Mm-mm.
Not quite that easy. It's not like it's a terrible thing. It's just, it's such a balance between the physical parts of who we are and the spiritual parts of who we are. And that doesn't go away when you have these amazing spiritual experiences,
That's it. That's it exactly. But you see, the thing is that these spiritual experiences were seen and experienced through the density
Yeah.
of my humanity.
Right. Until you choose different. Yeah. Until you go different. Yeah. Yep.
Until I am able to do enough of my own internal work to identify the distinction between my humanity and my divinity.
Right.
And that came along a little bit farther in my journey.
Mm-hmm.
But there was always this deep connection to the sacred, and like a hunger,
yes,
like a hunger, like
that's a good word.
And like I was on a conveyor belt somewhere, but I didn't know where.
Right.
And I know that actually, there was a time in my life when Ed and I were trying to have children, and I was just medically not able to do that. So we were going through, and as many women do, we were going through the pain, and the frustration of IVF, and oh my goodness sakes.
Yeah.
And ultimately it was not successful. And I had I've had these experiences with the divine all the time. And I was having so many of them that I said, God, it's okay. You don't need to be wasting them on me. I know you're there.
Mm-hmm.
And then after not being able to have children, I was angry with God.
Right.
And I said, I have to laugh at it now.
Yeah.
And I said, well, I'm not talking to you. I'm a good person, and I deserve to be able to have children. I could not see.
Right.
Talk about the way that we are so ensconced in our humanity, right? That I saw that my life early on, was, it's interesting. It's like the word that comes up to me right now is dependent upon me being able to be a mother.
Yeah.
And a nurturer. And a teacher. That was a natural thing for me. And so when that didn't happen, it plunged me into, I would say, definitely a deep depression. And this separation that had me separate a little bit from my own divine connection. You see, because I wasn't understanding it, I'm still looking at my life through, this is what should be happening.
Right.
And if I'm looking at, and now what I know clearly is that really all is well. That what
Mhm.
I did not, I know now what I couldn't see then,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And that there's more to the story. And so
Mhm.
I had to do a lot of my own internal healing work.
Mhm.
But as I moved more into doing the energetic healing work, and I did it in clinics, I did it in chiropractic clinics actually.
Mhm.
Um, I became more adept at moving energy and frequency within me.
Mhm.
And I thought that that was the answer. I love working in in clinics and working with athletes and people that have been in car accidents and pain, and they were absolutely amazing and extraordinary. And it's an honor to
Mm.
be uh,
Mhm.
in sacred space with someone
Mhm.
that never, it's interesting, brings tears to me right now. It's because it's not something that I would ever take for granted,
Mhm.
having the honor of doing
Right.
that work with somebody.
Yeah.
Um, and I was very good at it. Um,
Mhm.
and then in 2012, something happened, and I don't know what it was, but it was an internal signal. You know, like when you go along in life and it's like, "Oops, time for a change. We've
Mhm.
grown out of
Mhm.
this, and now there's time for something else."
Yep. Yep.
And then, I was called to something else, and the something else was, I mean, I thought I was living my life as being a healer.
Mhm.
I thought that was it. That was the, I found it,
Found it. Right.
and I did that for a long time. And then in 2012, the message was, I'm being called to something else.
Mm. Was that
And it had
scary? Was that unnerving, or was it empowering, or a little both?
mm, it was actually a little bit of both.
Mhm.
It was definitely being in the unknown of it, in the
Right.
unknown of everything, which I know now is a very powerful space to be in.
Mm.
But um, I thought, well, now what do I do? Because
Mhm.
the interesting thing also about the spiritual journey is that you're never given the answers.
Right.
You're given the questions.
Right. Right. Right.
Isn't that true?
Right. That's the eternity. That's the universe.
That's
That's what he yeah, it's so much. It's everything. Yeah,
it's everything. That's the yes and dot
yes,
dot dot.
yes, yes,
And
yes.
so actually the great way to live life is like I know what it is that I know right now, and then you can
Mhm.
say to yourself, yes and.
Yep.
Like so now it's available,
Yes.
right? So I was at Barnes and Noble, and I did a lot of studying with about Esther Hicks and
Mhm,
Abraham.
mhm,
Loved their work. I was definitely drawn to that.
mhm,
And so I was at Barnes and Noble, my local Barnes and Noble, and I was looking for another Esther Hicks Abraham book.
mhm.
And a book fell off the shelf in front of me and landed at my feet.
Wow. Yeah.
I was the only one in the aisle,
Wow. Yep, yep, yep. Those moments.
and it landed smack dab in front of me. And the title of the book was The Council of Light. I
Mm,
knew, I knew in that moment that it was my counsel speaking to me, that
mm,
if I chose to pick up that book, I was stepping over a threshold beyond which I would never return. And
mm.
I said, yes.
Yeah.
I picked
Yes.
it up. It was a book by Danielle Rama Hoffman, who was a
Okay.
wonderful, talented woman, all who also used to live in Seattle, but now lives in southern France. So
Okay.
I began checking into her and her work, and she does a lot of work with Thoth, who is an Egyptian um, figure that is the patron of scribe hieroglyphics,
Mm,
um, knowledge, architecture. Anyway, and I didn't know anything about the Egyptian pantheon
mhm,
at all, but
mhm.
I understand that, you know, mm, what's that word? Like the meanings of a
Yeah.
lot, the symbology.
Right.
The
Yes.
symbology of that.
Mhm.
And again, I don't understand it, but there's something there that was
Right.
calling me, but I didn't know what that was.
Right.
Anyway, so Danielle was having a program that was in France that was called Scribe It. I never thought I was going to be a writer, but I always wondered how do people write that many words anyway?
Yeah.
And so, but it was a chance to go to be with Danielle and to learn from her, and I
Mhm.
felt that connection. And when I began reading that book too, by the way, I had some extraordinary downloads of consciousness.
Mhm.
I mean, that unlocked something
Mhm.
within me.
Mhm.
And I didn't really realize until I began reading a little bit about Egyptian history and Egyptian wisdom that, like, so for example, if we were going to have a daughter, I would have named her Alexandria.
Mhm.
I didn't know that Alexandria is in is the location also of the Library of Wisdom.
Mm. Right.
And so what I've discovered is all of these ties as I've moved
Right.
through my life, all of these ties that are consistent, even though I didn't understand them at the time.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
And it's fascinating how all of that moves. So I when I came back from France, it was an extraordinary experience. I realized I had an experience there in Saint Baume, which is where Mary Magdalene lived the last 30 years of her life, and that was
Yeah.
magical.
Oh, I want to go there so bad. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Oh my goodness, and that really is where me speaking with the council
Mhm.
consciously occurred.
Began.
And what they said to me at the top of St. Baume, with the mists flowing over the hills,
Mm.
like the mists of Avalon, it was magical.
Wow.
And what they said was, my voice, your voice, our voice, one voice.
Mm. Mhm.
I'm still not understanding
Right.
everything that happens, right?
Right. Right.
It's, but it's, I'm pulled. I'm on this. There's this soul recognition that is undeniable. And so we were living in Arizona at the time, and I came back home again, and I began practicing, fine tuning this my capacity and my sensitivity for
Mhm.
energy and frequency,
Mhm.
which is what I had been using and honing
Mhm.
for years as I've been doing the energetic healing work,
Mhm.
was honed to an even greater extent as
Right.
I practiced what it takes to move my awareness to the council of light, which changes every single day, and there's a
Mhm.
reason why it must,
Mhm.
and still does. Um, it it was a fine tuning so that I could ultimately move my awareness to different areas of consciousness and frequency
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
translate consciousness and frequency into words.
Mm. Yeah. That's a practice. That takes a
That
practice.
was that was a practice, and I
Yeah.
did that for a long
Wow.
time.
Wow. Wow.
And uh, and then December 26th of 2017 happened.
Mm.
2017 was a powerful year. I stopped reading books also, by the way,
Mm.
as of 2015, when I began teaching myself the discipline and the capacity to scribe, because
Mhm.
I needed to know that anything that moved through me was
Mhm.
not influenced by anything else.
Oh, wow.
And
Interesting.
what I also found interesting too is that I never found like a teacher,
Mm,
one singular teacher.
right.
I find that interesting about, I mean, there's pieces and parts that came from different people in different sections at different times
Yes.
and culminated in 2017. So in 2017, I was in a pretty serious car accident and had a head injury.
Mm,
And I'm thinking that this played a part, understanding that there are no mistakes. So I had a traumatic brain injury in February of 2017.
mm,
We moved back to Seattle in September of 2017. November of 2017 is when my dad passed.
mm,
And fortunately, I was here in Seattle to be with family. And then December 26th of 2017, being a Canadian girl, that's Boxing Day.
right.
Right. So that I woke up that day, and my prayer at Christmas is always, may the Christed heart please be born within me.
Mm, mhm,
And so, and over the time as I've been doing my energetic healing work and studying how to be able to access these sacred frequency,
mhm,
there was nothing here that I took lightly.
mhm,
I felt the sacred component every single step of the way.
mm,
And as I feel that sacred expression, I know that I am I am on the right track.
mhm,
This reverence that is present every day
mhm,
is undeniable.
mhm,
And so December 26th of 2017, I wake up to the presence of the ascended masters,
mhm,
Jesus, Buddha, Sanat Kumara. I mean,
mm,
Saint Germain, Mary Magdalene, Mother Mary. I mean, name one.
mhm,
And they're there in front of me, all of the angelic orders,
mhm,
Archangel Gabriel, Archangel Michael, and they are there in front of me in a sea of white light.
mm,
And in the sea of white light, I am lifted.
mm,
I am like lifted and almost carried down the hall. And the words that I hear are 365 be the light, 365 be the light, 365 be the light. And I didn't understand what that meant, but this was a profound
mhm.
experience that actually lasted 3 days.
Oh, wow. Mhm,
It was an experience of every single cell of my being, physical, non-physical, being wrapped and enveloped and enmeshed with love.
mhm, mm,
Not with love that we know as being human, but
mhm,
with the love,
mm,
the divine essence, divine love. I
mhm,
mean, and I'm saying to myself as tears are falling down my face, I am saying, so this is what love is.
mm,
It
mhm,
is so much greater than I could ever have even dreamt up.
mm,
And the invitation was to sit and
mm,
write with us.
mm,
I said yes.
mhm.
I did not know that it was going to be turning into books.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, the day after, actually later on that day, I thought, oh, holy mackerel! I just agreed to be writing every single day
Mm,
for at least for a year.
mhm.
How how can I come up with that much? And I
Right.
hear laughter. I hear laughter. And I hear laughter. And I'm sitting at my computer and they say, well, you want to have some samples?
Wow.
And I'm like, yes. And my fingers are on the keyboard and there's like 16 of
Wow.
them right there. And I hear laughter. Do you want more?
Mm,
And so the thing is that as I sat every day
Yeah.
with the divine,
Mm.
and Toth was present there as a way to, what's the word? Not transcribe, transduce,
Mm. Right.
transducing the frequency
Mm-hmm.
between the divine and me,
Mm.
and at the same time showing me how every day to be able to reach that elevated space.
Mm-hmm.
And so the books of In Service to Love
Yeah.
began that day.
I'll make sure to put these pictures on, but there's 3 of them, and yeah, they're gorgeous. I mean, it seems that it must have been scribed because it's so powerful. You feel it. You feel it when you read. You feel it.
And so like did that first book, In Service
Mhm.
to Love, Love Remembered,
Mhm.
is day 1 through day 122 of me sitting down and receiving.
Mm.
And so the reader receives exactly what I did.
Mhm.
It's not a story about me.
Right.
It's not a story about me.
Right.
Although there's some examples, they use me as an example.
Yeah. Yep.
But it's the reader is the one that is moved into being a student if they so choose.
Yeah.
That's the invitation. It's like you
Right.
can become a student of this. And so overall, what the body of work is, and that was started 7 years ago. And now I still continue. And the work has evolved and expanded, and my capacity has evolved and expanded, and our world has evolved and
Mm.
expanded as well. And now I see the I see a much larger view now of this body of work.
Mm.
That I see that who I am is a presence of love.
Mhm.
I stand for the expansion of consciousness on this planet,
Mhm.
because that is something now that is available for all humanity to be able to experience. And it's as easy and as simple now as just holding that intention.
Mhm.
It's not difficult. Like when you think about enlightenment, like 20, 30 years ago, it was like, yeah, right.
Right. Right.
And it was like a carrot on a stick. And it
Right.
was something you can think about, but it was never really achievable. And actually it is.
Mm.
And so the way this whole body of work is the pathway.
Mhm.
It's the ascended masters taking the reader on a pathway that is uniquely designed for you, moving you toward your most authentic expression.
Mm.
Meaning, but it's always an invitation.
Mhm.
Like, what if you could consider your own divine nature?
Mhm.
Who you are is divine.
Mhm.
And they say, you just consider that.
Mhm.
Um, and so the body of work is it's a bridge between living now as a human being that's going through tremendous transformation on this planet, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And it feels so chaotic and challenging.
Mhm.
And moving to the next stage, which they refer to as the next evolutionary moment for humanity,
Mhm.
which is us experiencing a whole new level of wholeness.
Mhm.
That wholeness is redefined
Mhm.
now through this body of work as being a state of each one of us claiming not only the beauty and the richness of our humanity,
Mhm.
but the depth and expanse and wisdom of our divine nature that is ours also and always has been.
Mhm. Mhm. Yes.
So what happens then is that our awareness moves beyond the limitations of the density of being human
Mhm.
to the expanse. Actually, it's kind of like cutting out all the clutter. cleaning out the
Mhm.
closets.
Mhm.
So, or cleaning the windows is another image they use.
Yeah, yep.
Cleaning the windows so that the light of our own divine nature, of our I am, can
Mhm.
be experienced. So imagine living life on this beautiful planet. And I know that there's a lot of pain here,
Mhm.
but when we are informed by love, when we are
Mhm.
informed by source through our I am,
Mhm.
it changes the experience of being on this earth.
Mhm.
And I propose also that it actually makes a difference.
Mhm.
That as each one of us, when we're ready, because it's an evolutionary state, and
Mhm.
there's developmental thresholds to be crossed,
Right.
as every moment of evolution requires,
Mhm.
it's just a slight turn of perspective, and
Mhm.
this whole new world opens up. And so anyway,
Yeah.
I can go on.
Yeah, I love it. I think it's important because, when you were talking even about, those difficulties in, um, with infertility, there's such a difference between it's fine, I won't let it bother me, and this place of acceptance and it's okay. Do you know what I mean? And the journey doesn't have to be in a certain amount of time. It doesn't have to be a certain road to go on, but people can show up hoping that they've reached there, saying, oh, it won't bother me. It's fine, but there's this, it's a different way of, like, so I think sometimes people hear these and they just think, oh yeah, I've got to do that. Yeah, that didn't bother me. And there's a difference. Can you speak to that? Like, you have, but it's not that it's not that the grief ever leaves your experience necessarily,
No.
but
Mm-mm.
but how can we describe that? Because there is a journey, and like I said, I couldn't tell you what that journey was. I couldn't tell you how long that journey is, but maybe words like, maybe there is this, saying yes to the invitation. Maybe it's willingness to listen. I can't tell you exactly what it is, but I do know
Yeah.
that I can feel the difference between somebody that says, oh, and that was fine, it didn't matter, and to where you're saying I've learned at a higher frequency that I'm going to be okay. I have this trust that it's going to be okay, or that I'm okay, or that I'm seen
Yeah.
and loved and divine, which is different than hustling for it, a little bit.
I totally understand it. And the interesting thing about this process is that you can't hack it.
Right. And it's
It
individual. It's so individual.
it's so individual and it's so beautiful. So it's easy and probably a pattern
Mhm.
of our humanity.
Yeah.
We have patterns being
Right.
human that are
Yep.
reliable and predictable.
Yes.
And once we begin to say what resides beyond my patterns,
Mhm.
so to answer your question,
Yeah.
the it's understandable
Mhm.
that when we as human beings experience pain, that we want to put it aside because it's just really hard to be with.
Right.
And in our world, there's so many ways to distract us from pain,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
There is food, alcohol, sex, technology,
Mhm. Yep, you got it. All of
whatever,
it.
drugs. There's
Yep.
there's a whole, and I don't think really that you can really even be a human experiencing the pain of what it means to be human
Mhm.
and not have some sort of a distraction
Mhm.
from that pain.
Right. Or desire
So,
for it, at least.
right, right.
Sure.
And that is natural. So I'm thinking, understanding that it's like now I would go back to the me that was in so much pain.
Mhm.
And and actually I have,
Yeah.
and I would just like sit with me
Mhm.
and understand that there's a difference between expectations
Mhm.
and what is.
Yeah.
Can I be can I be with what is?
Mhm.
Because living from an expectation
Mhm.
is living from a past.
Mm. Yeah.
Expectations come from Like, where did I get what all my
Right.
expectations, right? I got my expectations from the past.
Yeah.
But you see, life is created in the immaculate now moment.
Mm,
The immaculate now moment is not informed by the past. We as
yes.
creators, divine creators, right?
Mm-hmm.
We choose every moment the ingredients of our creation.
Mm-hmm.
So if I am in the perspective of my past and expectations, and this is what I want,
Mm-hmm.
I am using old ingredients.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And I'm using old ingredients. So anything I create out of that
Mm-hmm.
is going to be that same frequency. If I
Right.
am in a state of pain
Mm-hmm.
and I am creating out of that,
Mm-hmm.
I'm creating more.
Yeah.
And I got to assure you that I was in a deep, dark night of the soul
Mm-hmm.
for quite a while. I
Right.
was on some depression meds.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because I could not have imagined my life
Right.
beyond having children.
Right. Right.
So how am I going to be justifying
Mm-hmm.
that reality
Yeah. And that human
with
programming that says, I get what, I'm blessed and I get what I want. That's the love. That's the love of God, is that you get your prayers answered, right? You get your prayers answered. And all of a sudden, what do you do with that? This was a good blessing. This was a good ask. This was
that?
a fine ask.
And that was my argument to God.
Yeah, I get it. I get it. I mean, and that's the thing, is like to hold reverence for that humanness and
Yes.
not sit there, not sit there, but to recognize that's the humanness in us.
And I don't have to stay there.
Right.
And I think if we can grant compassion to our
Yes.
humanity,
Yeah.
our humanity has some very easy, dependable requirements.
Right.
We want to know. We depend on being right.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Because being right and understanding our world on some level means survival.
Right.
So, but understand that if I understand my whole world, guess what? I'm
Right.
living from the past.
Right. 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 So true.
We want to be safe.
Right.
That means I don't want to bring anything new in. I've got my world.
Right. Figured it
my
out.
World.
Yep.
I got it. Leave me alone. I got it.
Yep. And
Right?
sometimes, that's really appealing to that human side. Really appealing.
It's like part of me even just thinking about it goes, oh, that feels so nice.
I'd take that. but not when you've had these moments of that pure love. Next time on part 2.
We all have our own gifts. We all do. My intention and my hope would be that each person that hears this says, I wonder what my gift is.
Yes. Yeah, you remind me of an experience I had, if you don't mind sharing.
I love it. I do. I truly can lean into love.
Right.
And lean into love, knowing that that's the truth of me,
Mm-hmm.
and that surrounds me all the time.
When most people are asked what they want, they will answer, I want to be happy. But happy takes practice. And that's what the Wholeness Library is all about. So check it out free at thewholenessnetwork.com.